Brother Hamzah, when I had asked for people to give me their choices of which Sahabi I should talk about. So he said, Hamzah, Radhi-Allahu anhu. And I said, why? So he gave a very good response. He said, we should know more about what our name stands for. So he wanted to know more about why his father named him Hamzah. What was so great about Hamzah that my father chose that name for me? And this is a good reason to want to know who a Sahabi is. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had his son Ibrahim Radhi-Allahu anhu, he also named him after a Nabi of Allah alayhi salatu wassalam, which is a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to name our children not after the meaning of the word, but after a great and illustrious person from our history, to establish a connection with the people of the past, to establish a connection with our history, and to identify ourselves with it. Right. The best way to identify yourself with the people that you love is to name your children after them, so that those children also will also be proud of their history, proud of their deen, and proud of the people who they're named after. It's that nisbat, that connection, which is very, very important and absolutely necessary for us to enter into Jannah. Because sometimes we don't have the type of a'mal and deeds that we need in order for us to gain access into Jannah. Then we have the connection with those people who can be our intercessors, who we identify with because of our love for them, right? And this is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that you will be with whom you love. In other words, who you identify yourself with, because we always identify ourselves with people whom we love, right? So those people can be our saviors on the Day of Judgment. So that's why it's good to know the Sahaba and the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam and our other pious predecessors from our past. So Hamzah bin Abdul-Muttalib radiyallahu anhu, let's mention some basic bio facts about him. Number one, we know that he was the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But so was Abu Talib, so was Abu Lahab, so was Abbas. But there was a difference between his relationship with his uncles. The only uncle that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had, who was his biological uncle, which means that his father and his brother had the same father and the same mother. That was Abu Talib. All of his other uncles and aunts were his uncles and aunts, but not biological. Father was the same, mother was different. So Hamzah radiyallahu anhu was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's uncle, but only from the father side. Otherwise, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's father, Abdullah's mother, that is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's paternal grandmother, and Hamzah radiyallahu anhu's mother were different. So then, did Hamzah radiyallahu anhu have any other biological sister? He did. Safiya binti Abdul-Muttalib, the mother of Zubair ibn al-Awwam radiyallahu anhu. So Safiya radiyallahu anha and Hamzah radiyallahu anhu both had the same mother who was married to Abdul-Muttalib. Her name was Hala. Hala. We need to remember her name. Her first name is Hala, and her father's name was Wahib. Hala bint Wahib. Wahib was the older or younger brother of Wahab. And Wahab was the father of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mother, Amina. Amina bint Wahab. So you see the relationship between Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu and Amina. Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu, his mother's, so his maternal grandfather and Amina's father were both brothers. Okay. This is important for us to know in the next story we're going to be reading, if we ever come to it today. So Hamzah bin Abdul-Muttalib and Safiya Radhi-Allahu ta'ala anha both were biological brothers and sisters, and subhanallah, they both accepted Islam and both became Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu is buried in Uhud, and Safiya Radhi-Allahu anha is buried in Jannatul Baqi'. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had another aunt, her name was Umaymah, but we don't know if she accepted Islam or not. There's no clear proof that she accepted Islam. Not Umaymah, it's Umaymah with the Hamzah. And then there was, of course, Abu Lahab. We know Abu Lahab, not only did he not accept Islam, but he was one of the arch enemies of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. On the other hand, we had Abu Talib, who also did not accept Islam, but was a great supporter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What else do we know about Hamzah ibn Abdul-Muttalib? His title, meaning his laqab. He was known by the Sahaba as Asadullahi wa Asadu Rasuli, the lion of Allah and the lion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Asadullahi wa Asadu Rasuli. And we often mention this in the khutbahs of Jummah. He had a son. His name was Ya'ala. Ya'ala. He also had a daughter. Her name was Umama. And another daughter, her name was Umara. We don't know much about Ya'ala, but we do know that Umama and Umara both accepted Islam. And Umara, according to different narrations, some say Umama too, both were offered to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a wife, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam rejected for reasons that we will mention later. But it's because of these children of his that his kunya was Abu Ya'la, because the kunya always came from the name of the children. So the father of Ya'la, Abu Ya'la and Abu Umara. Now, we often think, if I ask you, how old is your uncle and how old are you? And you'll see like there's a 15-year difference, 10-year difference, right? Usually when we say uncle, we think, somebody senior, quite a bit older than us, one of the elders of the family. But that's not how it was in that time, because people got married when they were very, very old as well. Which means that you could have an uncle that was about the same age as you. So, Hamzah radiallahu anhu was the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he was only 2 years older than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, when he was shaheed, martyred in the battle of Uhud, he was only 54 years old. He was only 54 years old. And Uhud happened in the 3rd year after the Hijrah. According to historical narrations, Hamzah radiallahu anhu accepted Islam 6 years after the Nubuwwah. 6 years after Nubuwwah. Shortly before Umar ibn Khattab accepted Islam. And Umar ibn Khattab was the 40th person to accept Islam, which means he must have been the 38th, 39th, maybe 35th, 36th, somewhere around there. But he wasn't one of the very first 10, 15 to accept Islam. It was later on. If we accept this historical narration that he accepted Islam in the 6th year after prophethood, How long was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Makkah Mukarramah? 13 years. So he accepted Islam in the 6th year after Nubuwwah. Add how many more years to that? 7 in Makkah Mukarramah, plus the 3 years, 2 years in Medina Munawwara, and then the 3rd year after in the Battle of Uhud, he was martyred. So that gives us how many years altogether that he was with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Roughly 10 years. A little bit less than 10 years that he spent with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam received the Nubuwwah. Of course, he was from Makkah Mukarramah and he was the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he knew Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from before the Nubuwwah. I'm sure that as being the same age group, they often spent time with each other, sometimes in family invitations, sitting in the same house with their family members, things of that sort. So they spent time together and there was a lot of interaction between them, being from the same family. But the time that was spent after Nubuwwah was about 9 to 10 years max, no more than that. What other relationship does he have with any other Sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? I mentioned another sister of Hamzah. Her name was Umayma bint Abdul-Muttalib. Now I mentioned that we don't have clear proof that she accepted Islam, but her children did. One of her children was one of the Ummahatul Mu'mineen. Zainab bint Jahash Radhi-Allahu anha was the daughter of Umayma bint Abdul-Muttalib, which makes her the first cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She had a brother, his name was Abdullah bin Jahash Radhi-Allahu anhu. Abdullah bin Jahash Radhi-Allahu anhu was also martyred in the Battle of Uhud. And he and Hamzah both were buried in the same grave. So if you go to the grave of Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu, most people think we're going to the grave of Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu, but in reality they're going to the grave of two Sahaba, Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu and Abdullah bin Jahash. Abdullah bin Jahash was his nephew and Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu was his maternal uncle, because Abdullah bin Jahash's mother was the sister of Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu. So there's another relationship established. So Zainab bint Jahash Radhi-Allahu ta'ala anha was the niece of Hamzah bin Abdul-Muttalib Radhi-Allahu anhu. As was the custom in Arabs, they didn't marry once, they usually married 2, 3, 4 times. So these different names that I give of his children were not necessarily from the same wife. Did he get married after he made the hijrah to Medina Munawwara? Yes. There's proof that he, of course, there's one of his wives was Khawla bint Qais radiyallahu ta'ala anha. We will talk about her maybe in another session. But after he migrated to Medina Munawwara, he did not migrate with any one of his wives that he married in Makkah Mukarramah. So he settled down in Medina Munawwara after the hijrah, and he got married to a woman from the Banu Najjar. This is the clan of Abu Ayyub Ansari. And I don't know the reason why specifically he would marry into Banu Najjar, but if you look at the relationship between Banu Najjar and Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's a very close connection. And I think I've mentioned that a couple of times before as well. So Banu Najjar was related to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from a long time back. Therefore, you read about when Abdullah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's father, when he would go to Sham, he would stop by in Medina Munawwara because that's where his family was. That family was Banu Najjar, because his grandmother was Salma, and Salma was from the clan of Banu Najjar. So Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu, by nature of being related to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was also related to Banu Najjar. So that may be most likely the reason that he married into a woman from the Banu Najjar. Allah knows best. The narration that I'm going to narrate is by Osam bin Zayd, which proves that he was married into a woman from Banu Najjar. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam once came to Hamzah bin Abdul-Muttalib's house and he did not find him there. So he asked his wife, and the Rawaya mentions وَكَانَتْ min Bani Najjar. She was from the clan of Banu Najjar. She said, خَرَجَ بِأَبِي أَنْتَ آنِفًا عَامِدًا نَحْوَكَ. Ya Rasulullah, he just left the house. May my mother and father be ransomed for you, Ya Rasulullah. He just left the house intending to go and meet you. وَأَظُنُّ أَخْطَأْكَ فِي بَعْضِ أَزِقَّةِ بَنِي نَجَّارٍ. Most likely, you just passed by each other, but he went on a different alley and you went on a different route, and you missed each other, but he was going your way to meet you. أَفَلَا تَدْخُلُوا يَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. And then she invites Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to enter the house. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came in and she presented something for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to eat. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ate. And then she said, Ya Rasulullah, hani'an laka wa mari'an. You know what hani'an means? Hani'an lak? Congratulations. You know how we say congratulations? Congratulations, Ya Rasulullah. Mubarak ho. Aapko bahut bahut mubarak ho. لَقَدْ جِئْتَ وَإِنِّي يُرِيدُ أَنْ آتِيَكَ أُهَنِّئَكَ وَأُمَرِّيَكَ. Ya Rasulullah, you came to me, but I was actually about to come to you in a short while to congratulate you and give you mubarak. For what? أخبرني أبو عمارة. Abu Umara referring to Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu. Abu Umara just informed me أنك أعطيت نهرا في الجنة يدعى الكوثر, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed upon you an ayah in which He informed you that He has given you a nahar, a river in Jannah that is known as Kawthar. He said yes. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained, وَأَرْصَتُهُ يَاقُوتُ وَمَرْجَانُ وَزَبَرْجَدُ وَلُؤْلُؤُ. He said he did. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me the Kawthar. And Arsa means like the courtyard, but most likely, since it's referring to Kawthar, it's referring to the basin where the water is located. That basin is made from Yaqut and Marjan and Zabarjad and Lu'lu, which means different types of pearls and gemstones, sapphires and rubies and emeralds. She said, أحببت أن تصف لي حوضك بصفة أسمعها منك. Ya Rasulullah, I would like you to describe for me what your Hawd Kawthar is like in your own words so I can hear it from you. So he says, هو ما بين أيلة وصنعاء. He's telling you how big the basin of Kawthar is. When we think of rivers or like a reservoir of water, we think not too big, right? He's saying this basin of Kawthar is all the way from Ayla to Sana'a. Sana'a is in Yemen. Ayla is Jerusalem. So the distance between Jerusalem and Yemen. So how long is that? Very long. Right? And in those times even longer. Because now it may be the distance of one day. In those days it was the distance equal to 3 months, 2 months. Maybe less, maybe more. So it would be considered long distance, very, very far. See, nowadays we say 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles. In those days they used to say 3 months distance, 4 months distance, 1 month's distance. Right? They wouldn't measure it by how far it is in distance. They would measure it by how long it takes for you to get there. Right? And so, in that sense, Jerusalem is very, very far from Sana'a. But here the scholars mention, wherever Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions distance in regards to the basin of Kawthar, and other rawayas where he mentions distance, he doesn't mean tahdeed. He's not specifying the distance. He's just telling you that it's a lot. Like sometimes we say thousands of times. He said it thousands of times. We don't literally mean 1,000 times. Were you sitting there counting with your tasbih? 1 time, 2 times, 1,000 1 time, 1,000 2 times, he already said it. We mean to say a lot of times. This is known as takthir, saying a lot of times. So Rasulullah was doing takthir, meaning to say it's very far. It's very vast, very large, the basin of Kawthar. Fi abariq mithlu adad al-nujum, and the bowls that will be used to give water to the people, to the Muslims who will come there to drink from the blessed hands of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there will be as many as the stars in the sky. Subhanallah. What does that tell you about the number of Muslims who will come to drink from the basin of Kawthar? Right? If you go to your kitchen, how many dishes do you find in the cabinets? If you tell your wife, it's you, me, and our 3 children, we only need 5 dishes, take all the rest of them and throw them out, what is your wife going to say? What is she going to say? She's going to say, you're crazy. She's going to say, you're crazy. Because it's not just about you and me and the 3 children. What about the guests that come? Sometimes we have guests. Sometimes we want to have invitation. And we call a lot of people, right? So you prepare accordingly to not just here and now, but according to possible situations in the future, right? Other people may come to the house. So if there is going to be that many bowls by the basin of Kawthar, that means that there's going to be that many people coming to drink from the Hawd of Kawthar. Otherwise, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala need to prepare so much? Inshallah, all of us will drink from the basin of Kawthar, inshallah. And he says to her, وَأَحَبُّ وَارِدِهَا, and the most beloved to me who will come to drink from the basin of Kawthar will be who? وَأَحَبُّ وَارِدِهَا عَلَيَّ قَوْمُكَ يَا بِنْتَ فَهَدْ. The most beloved that will come to drink from the basin of Kawthar will be your people, O daughter of Fahad, meaning the Ansar, because she was from the Ansar. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam expressing his love for the Ansar Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim ajma'in. How much he loved the Ansar. That I can't wait. When I am giving water from the basin of Kawthar, I'm going to be especially looking forward to the Ansar coming and me giving them water from the basin of Kawthar. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved the Ansar a lot. Why did he love them so much? Because they were the greatest helpers and supporters and defenders of Islam. Made a sacrifice of giving over their lives, their wealth, their homes, all waqf for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How did Hamzah Radhi-Allahu anhu accept Islam? There's no hadith narration, but there is historical narration. So this historical narration that I'm narrating is coming from the seerah of Ibn Ishaq. Ibn Ishaq wrote a seerah book on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so I'm taking this from there, and it's very, very long. Very long. So we're not going to mention this. We'll go over this next week on Wednesday. I just want to go over 1 or 2 things since we have 2-3 minutes left, and that is, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had 2 uncles who accepted Islam. Which of them did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam love the most? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself said in his words, "Khayru amami a'mami Hamzatu." The best of my uncles is Hamzah. The most beloved, the greatest. So if you want to know of these 2, Abbas radiallahu anh, Hamzah radiallahu anh, who was greater, then in the eyes of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hamzah radiallahu anh was much greater. One other thing we need to remember was that he was also a brother of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There was only a 2-year difference between him and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, Hamzah radiallahu anhu was still drinking, was still nursing. So there was a woman before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent off to Banu Sa'ad bin Bakr, where he drank and was nursed by Halima Sa'adiyya radiallahu anha. Her name was Thuwayba. Thuwayba. So Thuwayba had already nursed Hamzah radiallahu anhu. And now she was nursing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in that way, he became Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's Rida'i brother. In other words, they both drank milk from the same woman. So they became brothers. Which means that Hamzah radiallahu anhu's daughters can never be married to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because they are daughters of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like daughters of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they become his niece. Right? If Hamzah is his brother, his daughters become his niece, his nieces. So that's why when one of his daughters, Umara, was presented to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to marry him, he said, يَحْرُمُ مِنَ الرَّضَاءِ مَا يَحْرُمُ مِنَ النَّسَبِ. That whatever becomes haram from nasab, in other words, your biological or blood, is the same thing that becomes haram through milk as well. So, Hamzah radiallahu anhu may not be my biological brother, but he is my brother because we drank from the same, right? From the same woman. Therefore, he becomes like my brother, so his daughters become my nieces, so there's no way I can ever get married to them. And that's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam never married Umara radiallahu ta'ala anha. We'll talk about that in more detail next week. We mentioned there's a 2-year difference, but there's a riwayah about that helps us understand why the age difference was so small between Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Hamzah radiallahu anhu. But I'll just give you a little bit of a little note for us to remember, and then you can remind me next week so we can start off from there. Hamzah radiallahu anhu's mother was married on the same day. Hamzah radiallahu anhu's mother. Who was Hamzah radiallahu anhu's mother? Hala. Was married to Ibn-Abdul-Muttalib on the same day that Amina was married to Abdullah. So, father of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his grandfather were married on the same day. On the same day. So how much age difference is there going to be between Hamzah radiallahu anhu and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Not much. Right? We'll go through that narration inshallah next week. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Jazakumullah khair. Ahsan jazaa.